Hello and welcome back to Prep Bytes. Okay, so in this particular video, we are going to be going in and integrating our authentication, like the two routes that we created, which was the login and the register route onto our UI. Okay, so let's just go in and see how exactly we can go in and do the authentication and the authorization process. Okay, so the middleware, we'll be creating it later up ahead, but for the time being, I would say that we are going to be going in and just integrating the login and the registration feature into our front end. Okay, so I am just going to quickly fire up my client over here. Okay, so yes, there we go. So I've created two terminals over here just to make things easier on me. And I'm just going to fire up my UI. Okay, so once this, I'm just going to wait until this cooks up and we have our development server up and running. So if I take you into my browser here, it would surely go in and load up and give us our very own our very first registration page. So this is the component which we had already went in and created. There's just a bit of conditional rendering going in here, and as you can see, if I want to go in and register, I could enter my username, email ID and password, the same three things which we specified in our model. And if I want to log in, I'm going to be giving in my username and my password, and I'll be able to go in and get access to the account. So now the thing here is that how exactly are we going to go in and perform this operation, right? So I'm going to take you through this process. I've already implemented the login and the registration. So I'll take you through the process of this. So coming back in here, let me directly take you into this component that we have for the authentication, for the login and the registration, right? So this is the component which is called the login component. We have already created this up in the previous session. Now, there are a few additional things that I have managed to go in and use up over here. And there are a few things here that you would notice. So the first thing altogether is that we have to go in and make an HTTP request, a post request to our login route as well as to our registration route. Okay. So as you can see for my, I have two functions over here. I have my login handler and my sign up handler. And these two functions are what's going to help me to go in and perform the login and the registration. So first and foremost, starting with the sign up handler, which is where we are doing the registration process. As you can see, if I go in and I give in some information into the registration part over here, I have a few text fields available over here. I have one for the username, I have one for the email address, and another one for the password, and then a sign up button. Okay, so once the button goes in and gets clicked, okay, the moment this particular button goes in and gets clicked, the sign up handler is going to go in and get fired. And the sign up handler, first and foremost, goes in and does a few things here, right? The data, whatever data I'm going to go in and enter, will be present inside of the state variable called as data. Okay, so if I'm entering the name, email, or password, regardless of whether it is the login component or the register component, even though I just used one component for the same thing, all the data will be present within this particular state variable that I've created called as data. So within my sign up handler, you can see I am passing, when I'm making the post request, there are three things I have to specify here. First is the route. Okay, so I need to do registration. So this is the route for the register controller, right? So this is the API from where that we are making the request to. Then if I want to pass some data here, I am passing this out over here as data, which is nothing but, as you can see, is an object with these three properties that are name, email, and password. And the third thing that we need is the configuration, which is basically the headers of the request object that is going to go in and get sent. This is going to be way more relevant when we want to go in and do the authentication process later up ahead. Okay, so as you can see, this is the configuration headers, all right, and we are passing it to the as a parameter when we are making our post request. Okay, so once this post request has been made, it's going to go in and give me back a response, which is something we had already seen. If you remember that in Postman, we had already done this in the previous video, where if you go in and make a registration, it's going to go in and return you back this response object. So this response object, which is being returned, we are just going in and getting it stored inside of a variable. Now, this is the important part here. Okay. Now, what's the idea over here that in order to ensure that, okay, this person has signed in, I kind of want to go in and keep track of the part that, okay, so there's a user who has currently went in and either he has registered or he has signed in. If he's registering, obviously we'll directly go in and sign him in. Okay, he doesn't have to log in. If you're registering, you directly go in and get logged in. Okay, so what we want to do is, in order to go in and achieve this, the idea is fairly simple. The moment you go in and get back a response, as you can see, the moment I make this post request, I'm going to get back a response, which is the same object that I had shown you in Postman. Okay, it's the same object as you can see in here. The same object. Okay, this same object is going to be returned back to me. So what I'll be doing is I'll be going in and taking this object and storing it inside of a variable. Now this variable that I have over here called as response, I can go in and utilize this to figure out whether the user has been authenticated or not, right? So what's my idea? We are going to go in and utilize local storage. So you can even go in and use cookie storage, but I'm using local storage. It's up to you. It's all in the way you want to do it. So what I've done over here is I've utilized my local storage, and I've set an item, and I'm calling the item as user data, and taking my response and just storing it in my local storage. Okay, so the moment the user registers, his information, once he authenticates himself, right? Once he goes in and gives the correct username, email ID and password. Okay, once he registers, whatever response I'm going to go and get back, I'll be storing it within my local storage. Now the relevance of this will go in and come in later. Now the thing here is, you can also see there's an additional line that is popping up over here, which is called a set loading false. So what's the idea for this? It's really simple. So the moment I go in and I click on the sign up button, this particular operation, as is an asynchronous operation, will take some time. Okay, so the idea here is to just go in and create up a variable over here called as loading, which will go in and tell my component whether the login or the registration process is over. Okay, so if the registration process is still going on, like you're going to send the data and you need to go in and wait until the response is given back, right? So until that time, okay, until the response is given back, we kind of want to go in and show a small loading bar. Okay, so in order to achieve this, I'm actually just going in and utilizing the MUI library, because rather than creating things from scratch, this makes the whole process a bit more on the easier side. So I'm using up a few components over here, some pre-built components over here, which I'm going to quickly just show you. So over here, you'll be able to notice that within MUI, there's a bunch of components that you can utilize for showing that, okay, the registration or the login process is going on. Okay, because until the registration, the API that we have, until it returns back as a response, we cannot send the user into our application. How can I let the user to use my application if my server doesn't tell him that, okay, I have successfully registered him, or okay, this guy has given the right username and password? So I need to wait for the response. So until the response comes back, okay, I kind of want to go in and show a loading button. So for going in and doing so, you can just easily use some pre-built library. There are so many out in the market. I prefer MUI because it's something that I'm pretty much familiar with. So I'm using the same. If you want, you can use other libraries. You can use Chakra UI, and there's so many libraries that are out there. Okay, so here, one of the components that we're going to be using here is going to be, first and foremost, we're going to be using backdrop. And as you can see, when I click on it, you can see it just goes in and blurs out. It darkens the foreground, and I get the loading icon. It just circles on and on and on. So this is what I've used, so that until the request comes back from my backend, this is going to go in and keep popping out, right? So it's just some really simple conditional rendering that I have done by utilizing the state variable called as loading. The initial value is false. Okay, so what's going to happen over here is while the whole process, right? So if it is set as true, so initially when you go in and you do the login process, so if I click on the login handler, or the button for login, or the button for sign up, I'm setting the value of this variable called as loading to that of true. Okay, So it automatically goes in and starts, shows up the backdrop, and the circular thing comes into the picture. So it'll go in and stay and keep on rotating there on and on and on until I get back a response and I navigate the person onto the correct route, which is the welcome route that we've already created. Okay. So if you get any error, I've also did this additional thing where I've created up a small toast message again, which is created by using, again, I've used MUI for the same thing. There is a pre-built component that you can use, which is called as alert over here. And as you can see, you can utilize this to go in and give a small pop-up. Okay, so I've used this, and in case you go in and you enter a user ID or a password which is invalid, it will go in and show you this warning alert over here, just so that the the UI that we have is a bit more, snappy. Like it's not going to stay stagnant. Just because you enter the wrong password, you should know that, yeah, the password is wrong, right? So you're going to get a small message at the top, which is going to say that, okay, so the password that you entered is incorrect, as in such. So these are two of the additional components that I've used from MUI, and is fairly easy for you to go in and integrate into your code as well. Okay. So once this is done, this is all you have to go in and do, right? So these two are functions, and the first thing that we do in the function is to just set the loading to true. So until the response comes back from our register or the login APIs that we created, we are going to show the backdrop. And if the password is incorrect, okay, so let's say, for example, I'm going in and doing the login process. And if there is an error, then I'm going to go in and directly just fire up my component that I've created, which just goes in and shows this small toast message. Okay, it'll go in and show me a small toast message over here. As you can see, I have a component that I've already created called as toaster, which just uses the same alert component that I was showing you people just now. Okay, so I'm using the same alert component, and toaster is just an additional component that I created, which uses the alert component and icon button and snack bar, so that the UI just becomes a bit more snappier, right? And as you can see, I can give it some custom message as well, so that the UI, it's a bit more, transparent on what is happening at the backend. Okay, so once you go in and you do this whole process, one of the important things that we've done over here, guys, is this process of going in and storing the response back in our local storage. Now, I'll tell you why this is going to be helpful for us. Because the thing is, I can go into my application and just go in and say, okay, rather than going into the root route that I have, the home route that I have, which is the login and registration component, I can just go in and write directly app/welcome. I don't need to do any authentication so as to go in and access the welcome route or any other route or the create group route. I can just go in and change the URL in the address bar, and I will directly be sent there. But the main use case of going in and getting this stored up somewhere is that once you have this data stored, you will be able to go in and check whether the local storage has some data called as user data. Okay, so I've already added this in. So even in the welcome component, you can see at the very top, what I've done over here is I'm fetching. Okay, so local storage works really, it's fairly easy to go in and use local storage. Generally, you're going to just go in and use two of these functions, which is three of these functions, I'll say. We have set item, get item, and then you also have remove, and then you also have clear. So it's technically four. These are the four most common functions that you use with the local storage object. So in this login component, we are setting this item called as user data. In the welcome component, and in majority of the components that you see over here, UI components that we created with routes specified to them, what I'm doing is I'm just fetching the data. I'm getting the item called as user data from my local storage. If it doesn't exist, I'll just go in and say user is not authenticated. Let me go in and take him to the home directory, which is nothing but the login or registration page. This makes it so that you're not able to go in and enter into components directly in which you are not authenticated to. So you will only be able to use this app if you have authenticated yourself, right? All right. So let me go in and show you this in action. So I'm going to take you into my browser over here, and we should have our application created up. Okay. So I'm going to start with the registration process. Okay. And then I'll also show you how to go in and log in. So I can log in here as well. So I can add in the user ID password that we had already sent. We can go in and do so. So I guess it was, if I open up my, yeah, it was user1, right? So I'm going to add in the username over here as user1, and the password was just password. Okay, I think I mistyped it, so I'm going to retype it again. And if I click on login, okay, you can see it just goes in and takes me into my chat application, and it even says hi user1. Okay, so the username is already taken in, and it just shows this. I just added a bit of additional code in here. Now, if I want to go in and remove myself out, I added in a small logout button as well, so that you can see this. Okay, so the login was done by using the data which already was present in my database, which we sent or for the user that we created using Postman. Okay, so we didn't use the UI to create that user, we created it using Postman. So we sent in a post request and we sent in the data requested and everything. So now let's try going in and creating our own user by using or by integrating it with our front end. So I'm gonna add in a username here. So I'll call it as user2. I can give him an email ID over here. So I'll say user2@email.com. There isn't much of a validation here, but if you people feel like you can add OTP authentication as well onto this, so do let us know in the comments if you want us to go in and implement the same. But it is one of the options that you can give to your application here. Now for password, as I'm really bad at remembering password, I'm going to go with password again. Okay, because we're going to be doing a bit of testing later up ahead. So I'm going to just go in and click on sign up. And for a brief second, you would have seen that loading symbol, right? For a brief second, loading symbol was there. And as you can see, I am currently logged in as user2. And if I go into my online users component, as you can see, user1 is already here. So all the available users will show up over here. I'll show you how to create routes to go in and implement this. But for the time being though, I'll say the registration and the login is working in as they should. Now let's also go in and try this out, where if I go in and enter a wrong user ID and password. So let's say I'm going to try for user3 and I'm going to give some password. Let's say password something. Okay, I'm going to just add some random user ID and password. So if I click on login, let's see what happens. Okay, so as you can see, it took in, there was a small backdrop that came in. The data that I had was sent to my backend. The backend was like, okay, so the name is user3. It's going to fetch the information for user3 from my database. It's going to see into my database. Is there any information for user3? Is there any information for user3? Let's just check it. Okay, so this is my database that I have over here. I'm going to do a quick refresh. It's going to check into my database. Is there any information for user3? And as you can see, there is no entry within the users for user3. So it's going to go in and give me back an error. As it goes in and gives me back an error, it will go in and make this pop up. Okay, so you'll see that small alert show up at the top, which is invalid username and password. This is again done courtesy of MUI. And that's it. So this is how you can go in and do a really simple authentication and authorization and encryption or you can integrate this into your front end. Okay. So in the next video, we're going to be going in and building our authentication middleware and also discussing up a bit on the additional routes that we'll have to create for the chats and the messages as well. Okay. So that would be all for this particular video. I'll see you in the next one.